My brother stood up at Thanksgiving, announced my parents were giving him the family business, and I was getting nothing. So I took a sip of wine, looked at my dad, and said, "Should I tell them now, or do you want to?" My brother Ethan stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, champagne glass raised like a scepter, and announced to 37 members of our extended family, "Mom and Dad have officially decided to sign the company over to me. Little sis gets nothing." The room erupted in applause. Aunts I hadn't seen in years lifted their glasses. Uncles whistled and cheered. Cousins clapped like they were witnessing history. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a cloth napkin, overcome with pride. My father sat at the head of the table, wearing the satisfied expression of a man who believed he'd secured his legacy. And Ethan, golden boy, firstborn son, the heir apparent who'd been groomed for this moment since he was 12 years old, stood there like a king receiving his crown, that smug grin plastered across his face as he soaked in the adoration. I didn't clap. I set my wine glass down slowly, deliberately, let the crystal base click against the mahogany table my grandfather had built with his own hands 60 years ago. Then I looked straight at my father. "Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the applause like a scalpel. "Should I tell them now, or do you want to?" The room went quiet, not gradually, instantly, like someone had pressed mute on reality. My father's fork hit his plate with a clang that seemed to echo off the walls. Ethan's face cycled through confusion, annoyance, and then something that looked almost like fear. "Tell us what, Ava? What could you possibly have to say?" I reached into my bag, the leather messenger bag I'd carried into this house like it was nothing special, like it didn't contain the nuclear codes to everything they'd built, and pulled out a manila envelope. "Open it." My family had been writing me out of their story since I was 12 years old. That was the year Grandpa Walt died. The year my father gathered us in the living room of this same house, sat us down on this same furniture, and announced that Ethan would inherit Bennett Industrial Solutions when he came of age. "That's how it should be," Dad said, his tone suggesting this was natural law rather than a choice. "This business stays with the men of the family. That's how Grandpa wanted it." I remember looking at my grandfather's portrait on the wall, stern face, kind eyes, the man who'd taught me to read financial statements when I was 9 years old, and knowing in my gut that Dad was lying. Grandpa had never said anything like that. He'd spent hours with me in his office, showing me how the company worked, telling me stories about building it from nothing. But I was 12. What could I say? I asked, "What about me?" Dad laughed, actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. "Sweetheart, you're going to grow up, get married, have your own life. Your brother is the legacy. You're going to be someone's wife someday. That's legacy enough." From that day on, I was invisible. Ethan got sent to leadership camps every summer, business seminars during school breaks, entrepreneur competitions where he'd present ideas that were actually mine, repackaged in his voice. I got unpaid filing work at the company and a pat on the head when I asked questions. When I was 16, I spent 3 weeks creating a comprehensive cost-saving proposal for the manufacturing floor. Grandpa had taught me the basics of operational efficiency before he died, how to identify waste, how to streamline processes, how to read the numbers that told the real story of a business. I expanded on everything he'd shown me, ran the calculations, created presentation slides. I handed it to my father, hoping, stupidly, naively hoping, that maybe this would be the thing that made him see me. He didn't even read it. He flipped through the pages without looking at the content, then handed the entire folder to Ethan. "Present this at the board meeting next week. Good practice for when you're running things." Ethan did, word for word. He didn't understand half of what he was saying. When a board member asked a follow-up question about depreciation schedules, he stared blankly until Dad jumped in with an answer. Everyone applauded him anyway. That night, I cried in my room for 3 hours. Then I made a decision. If they wouldn't give me a seat at the table, I'd build my own table, and someday I'd buy theirs. I left home at 18 with a full scholarship to Wharton, 3 part-time jobs to cover living expenses, and exactly 0 support from my family. Nobody came to my high school graduation. Nobody helped me move into my dorm. Nobody called to check if I'd arrived safely. The only acknowledgement I received was a text from my mother. "Good luck, sweetie. Call when you're settled." I never called. They never noticed. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance. Got recruited by Morrison & Associates, one of the top M&A advisory firms on Wall Street. Started as an analyst making $87,000 a year, which felt like a fortune to someone who'd been surviving on ramen and determination. Nobody came to my college graduation either. But by then, I didn't need them anymore. My job was finding undervalued companies before anyone else noticed the cracks, analyzing balance sheets, identifying distressed assets, spotting the moment when a business tipped from struggling to salvageable. I was good at it, really good. By 28, I was a senior associate. By 31, I was a director with a team of 12 analysts under me. And then, 3 years ago, I saw a familiar name on a client's acquisition target list, Bennett Industrial Solutions. My family's company, listed as a potential sell-off opportunity, distressed, struggling, vulnerable. The report was brutal. Revenue down 34% over 5 years, market share hemorrhaging to competitors, debt-to-equity ratio that made our risk assessment team wince. The company my grandfather had built from nothing, the company my father had been so desperate to hand to his son, was dying, and nobody had told me. I called my father that night, asked what was happening with the business. His response was immediate and dismissive. "This is men's business, Ava. You wouldn't understand the complexities involved." I texted Ethan. His response came 12 hours later. "LOL, stay in your lane, little sis. We've got it handled." They didn't have it handled. I could see that clearly in the numbers. But more importantly, I could see something else in those documents. Something that changed everything. Grandpa had never consolidated ownership of the company. When he died, his shares had been distributed according to his will, but not all to my father, like everyone assumed. Shares had gone to retired employees who'd helped build the business, to old partners who'd invested in the early days, to distant cousins who'd loaned money during lean times, to a charitable trust Grandpa had established for factory workers' children. My father controlled only 31% of Bennett Industrial Solutions. He'd been acting like he owned the company outright, but he didn't, not even close. And suddenly, I had a plan. The first call I made was to Victoria Chen, a corporate attorney at Sullivan & Cromwell with 23 years of experience in hostile acquisitions and shareholder disputes. "Is this legal?" I asked her after explaining what I wanted to do. "Acquiring shares in a privately held company from willing sellers? Absolutely legal. The question is whether you can convince enough shareholders to sell. What percentage would I need for controlling interest? 50% plus 1 share. That gives you the legal authority to appoint and remove the CEO, approve major business decisions, and essentially run the company however you see fit. And my family couldn't stop me?" Victoria paused. I could hear her thinking through the implications. If you acquire majority ownership through legitimate transactions with willing sellers, there's nothing they can do. They might try to challenge individual sales, claim some kind of improper influence, but if everything is properly documented and notarized, they'd lose. "Good. I need you to draw up acquisition agreements, standard terms, fair market value based on current company performance, which, given their financials, won't be very high," Victoria noted. "No, it won't be. The first shareholder I contacted was Harold Holloway, a retired engineer who'd worked at Bennett Industrial for 37 years. He owned 4.2% of the company, shares Grandpa had given him as a retirement bonus in 1987. Harold was 83 years old, living in a nursing home in Connecticut. His daughter helped arrange the call. "Mr. Holloway, my name is Ava Bennett. Walter Bennett was my grandfather." "Little Ava?" His voice crackled through the phone, but I could hear the warmth in it. "I remember you. You used to come to the factory with Walt. He'd set you up in his office with a calculator and a stack of invoices. You remember that?" "Of course I remember. Walt talked about you all the time. Said you had the head for this business. Said you were the one who should be running things someday." He paused. "I was real sorry when I heard how things went after he passed. Didn't seem right the way they treated you." My throat tightened. "Mr. Holloway, I'm calling because I'd like to buy your shares in Bennett Industrial. Fair market value based on current financials. Why would you want shares in that mess? Company's been going downhill for years. Your brother doesn't know what he's doing, and your father won't admit it. That's exactly why I want them. I'd like to fix what they've broken." Silence on the line. Then a dry chuckle. "Walt always said you'd come back for it. Said you'd find a way." More silence. "I'll sell, but not because of the money. Because your grandfather would have wanted you to have them." The papers were signed and notarized within a week. Harold Holloway's 4.2% became mine. 1 down. Many more to go. Over the next 18 months, I made 47 phone calls to scattered shareholders of Bennett Industrial Solutions. A widow in Kansas named Martha Chen cried when I called. Her husband had been one of Grandpa's original partners, had invested $15,000 in 1962 when the company was just an idea. That investment had become 3.7% of the company. "My husband always said Walter was the most honest man he ever knew," she told me. "He would be so disappointed to see what's happened." A cousin I'd never met, Douglas Bennett, my grandfather's brother's son, laughed out loud when I mentioned Ethan. "That boy couldn't run a lemonade stand. I've been to 3 board meetings in the last 10 years, and every time he says something that makes me cringe." Douglas owned 2.1%. He signed it over without hesitation. A retired accountant named Patricia Reyes had worked at Bennett Industrial for 29 years. She owned 1.8% from an employee stock purchase plan. "Your grandfather was the best boss I ever had," she said. "Your father is not, and your brother is worse." One by one, they signed. Quietly, privately. No announcements, no fanfare. Just legal documents, wire transfers, and the gradual accumulation of power. Each transaction was handled by Victoria Chen's team. Each signature was notarized by a licensed notary public. Each share transfer was properly recorded with the company's transfer agent, a requirement that meant my ownership was technically visible in corporate records if anyone had bothered to look. Nobody looked. My father was too busy trying to save a sinking ship. My brother was too busy taking credit for other people's work, and the rest of the board was too busy covering their own positions to notice that the company's ownership structure was fundamentally changing beneath their feet. By November, I owned 44.3%. I needed 50.1%, and I knew exactly where to get it. Ray Carter was my grandfather's closest friend. They'd met in the Korean War, had started Bennett Industrial together in a rented garage in 1959, had built it into a manufacturing empire through 40 years of partnership and trust. When Grandpa died, Ray had stepped back from active involvement in the company. He was 87 now, living in an assisted living facility in Vermont, but his mind was sharp as ever. He owned 7.1% of Bennett Industrial, shares he'd kept as a reminder of his friend, not as an investment. I flew to Vermont the week before Thanksgiving, sat with Ray in his small apartment surrounded by photos of his life, his late wife, his children, his grandchildren, and in the corner, a faded picture of two young men in front of a garage with a hand-painted sign, Bennett Carter Manufacturing. "You look just like him," Ray said when he saw me. "Walt, I mean. Same eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw. I need your help, Mr. Carter. Call me Ray. Your grandfather did." "Ray," I took a breath. "I need to buy your shares. I'm trying to take control of the company before my father and brother destroy it completely." Ray studied me for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder, old, yellowed, held together with a rubber band. "Walt gave me this 6 months before he died. Told me to hold on to it until someone worthy came along." He handed me the folder. Inside was a handwritten letter dated 23 years ago, my grandfather's handwriting. "Ray, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably wondering what to do with your shares. I have a feeling things aren't going to go the way I hoped after I die. Richard doesn't have the vision, and Ethan doesn't have the character, but Ava does. She has both. If she ever comes to you, and I believe she will, give her everything she needs. She's the one who should be running this company. She always was. Your friend, Walt." My hands were shaking when I finished reading. 23 years. My grandfather had seen this coming 23 years ago. Ray slid the share transfer documents across the table. He'd already had them prepared. "I've been waiting a long time for you, Ava. Don't make me regret this." The week before Thanksgiving, I sat in my apartment in Manhattan and ran the numbers one final time. Harold Holloway, 4.2%. Martha Chen, 3.7%. Douglas Bennett, 2.1%. Patricia Reyes, 1.8%. 17 other shareholders, 32.4%. Ray Carter, 7.1%. Total, 51.3%. Controlling interest. Majority stake. Legal authority to appoint and remove the CEO, approve or reject major business decisions, and fundamentally reshape the direction of the company. I owned Bennett Industrial Solutions, and nobody in my family had any idea. I called Victoria Chen that night. "It's done. I need you at Thanksgiving dinner. You want me to serve papers at a family holiday? I want you there as a witness, and to answer any legal questions that might arise." Victoria laughed. "This is either going to be the most satisfying moment of your career or a complete disaster. Maybe both." Thanksgiving dinner was at my parents' house, the same house where I'd grown up, the same dining room where my father had announced 23 years ago that I would never inherit anything. I arrived at 2 p.m. with a bottle of wine and my leather messenger bag. Victoria Chen arrived separately, introduced to my confused parents as a colleague from New York who didn't have family plans for the holiday. The meal was standard family chaos. Children running around, aunts gossiping in corners, uncles arguing about football, my mother fussing over the turkey, my father holding court about business challenges, carefully avoiding any mention of how badly things were actually going. Ethan was in rare form, wearing a new suit he'd clearly bought for the occasion, dropping hints all afternoon about big announcements coming and exciting changes for the company. I waited. The announcement came between the main course and dessert. My father stood up first, tapping his glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "I have something important to share with all of you. After 40 years of building Bennett Industrial, I've decided it's time to pass the torch to the next generation." Appreciative murmurs from the assembled relatives. "So, it's my pleasure to announce that effective January 1st, I'll be signing over my shares and my position as CEO to my son, Ethan." That's when Ethan stood up, glass raised, crown descending. "Mom and Dad have officially decided to sign the company over to me. Little sis gets nothing." The room erupted in applause. I set my wine glass down. "Dad, should I tell them now or do you want to?" Ethan ripped open the envelope with his characteristic arrogance, expecting something trivial, a complaint, a protest, nothing that would actually matter. Then he started reading. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror that spread like ink in water. What is this?" "The company isn't being signed over to you," I said, standing slowly, "because Dad doesn't own enough shares to sign over anything." I walked around the table, spreading documents as I went. Share transfer agreements, notarized ownership certificates, a complete breakdown of the company's current shareholder structure. Grandpa never consolidated ownership of Bennett Industrial. When he died, shares were distributed to dozens of people, retired employees, old partners, family members, charitable trusts. Dad controls 31%. That's nowhere near enough for the kind of unilateral transfer he just announced. My father's face had gone pale. Those shares are scattered, impossible to collect. We've been operating as majority owners for 20 years, yes. Operating, but not owning. There's a difference." I pulled out the final document. "As of last week, I own 51.3% of Bennett Industrial Solutions. I am the majority shareholder. Legally, I control the company." Dead silence. Someone dropped a fork. A child asked a question and was immediately shushed. My mother's hand was pressed against her chest like she was having trouble breathing. Victoria stood up from her seat. I'm Victoria Chen, corporate attorney at Sullivan & Cromwell. I've been advising Ms. Bennett on this acquisition for the past 18 months. Every transaction has been properly documented, notarized, and recorded. The ownership transfer is legally unassailable. Ethan stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. This is fraud. You can't just— It's not fraud, Victoria said calmly. It's a legitimate acquisition of shares from willing sellers at fair market value. Every shareholder Ms. Bennett approached chose to sell voluntarily. Many of them were quite enthusiastic about it, actually. They were tricked. They were manipulated. I have recorded phone conversations with every single shareholder, I said, each one explaining exactly why they wanted to sell. Would you like to hear what they said about your leadership, Ethan? He went silent. My father finally spoke, his voice shaking. Ava, this is ridiculous. The company is mine. I built it. Grandpa built it, I interrupted. You inherited it, and you've been running it into the ground for 20 years. Revenue down 34% since you took over. Market share cut in half. Debt levels that would make any investor run screaming. You didn't build anything, Dad. You just managed the slow destruction of everything Grandpa created. How dare you? How dare I? Something in me snapped. 23 years of being dismissed, ignored, written off. It all came pouring out. How dare you? You told me when I was 12 years old that I didn't matter, that I'd never be part of this company, that I should just grow up and get married and be someone's wife because that's all I was good for. I pulled out Grandpa's letter, the one Ray had given me, handed it to my father. Grandpa didn't agree. He wrote this 23 years ago, predicting exactly what would happen. He knew you didn't have the vision. He knew Ethan didn't have the character. And he knew I was the one who should be running things. My father read the letter. His hands were shaking by the time he finished. This doesn't prove— It proves that the man who built this company believed in me. It proves that you've been lying to everyone, including yourself, for 2 decades. I took the letter back. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday. I'll be presenting my ownership documentation and calling a vote to remove the current CEO. That's you, Dad. You're out. My mother started crying. My aunts and uncles sat frozen in their seats. Cousins exchanged shocked glances. Ethan finally found his voice. You can't do this. This company is supposed to be mine. I've been preparing my whole life. You've been coasting your whole life, I said. Every idea you've ever presented was stolen from someone else. Every success you've claimed was earned by other people. You couldn't run a lemonade stand without Daddy holding your hand, and everyone in this room knows it. That's not the cost-saving proposal from 2008, the one that saved the company $2.3 million. That was mine. Dad took it from me and gave it to you. The marketing pivot in 2015 that opened the Asian markets, my analysis, my strategy, your name on it, the restructuring plan that kept you out of bankruptcy in 2019. I sent that to Dad anonymously through a business consultant. He never knew it was me. Silence. Everything you've accomplished was built on my work, Ethan. Everything. And now I'm taking back what was always supposed to be mine. I picked up my wine glass, took a slow sip, smiled. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. The board meeting on Monday was brief. I presented my ownership documentation. Victoria walked the board through the legal implications. My father tried to object, tried to claim procedural violations, tried everything he could think of. The vote was 7-2 in favor of removing him as CEO. The only dissenting votes were his own and Ethan's. I was appointed interim CEO effective immediately. My first act was to fire Ethan, not out of spite, well, not entirely out of spite, but because he genuinely wasn't qualified for any position of responsibility. I offered him a severance package that was more generous than he deserved, 6 months' salary, continuation of benefits, a positive reference if he wanted to find work elsewhere. He didn't take it well. You can't fire me. This is my birthright. This company has my name on it. It has our name on it, I corrected. Bennett. And Bennett Industrial Solutions is going to survive because I'm going to save it. Something you were never capable of doing. He stormed out. I haven't spoken to him since. Saving the company took 3 years. I brought in Marcus Williams, a turnaround specialist with 27 years of experience in manufacturing, to help restructure operations. We cut costs, modernized equipment, renegotiated supplier contracts. We focused on our core competencies and divested non-performing divisions. I hired Sarah Chen, no relation to my attorney, as CFO. She'd been chief financial officer of a Fortune 500 company before retiring, and she came out of retirement specifically because she liked the story of what I was doing. We brought in new blood at every level, promoted internal talent that had been overlooked for years, created actual paths for advancement that weren't dependent on family connections. By year 2, we were profitable again. By year 3, we were growing. Revenue up 23%, market share recovering, new product lines launching. The company my grandfather built was finally becoming what it should have been all along. My parents never apologized. My mother calls occasionally, makes small talk, never mentions the company or what happened. My father doesn't call at all. I hear through relatives that he spends his days playing golf and telling anyone who'll listen about how his ungrateful daughter stole his legacy. He doesn't understand that it was never his legacy to give. Ethan moved to Florida, took a job as a sales manager at a car dealership. His wife left him 6 months after he was fired. Turns out she'd married him for the money and the family name, not for his winning personality. Last I heard, he's engaged to someone new, probably telling her stories about the empire he was supposed to inherit. The relatives who cheered at Thanksgiving have split into two camps. Some of them have reached out, apologized for how they treated me, wanted to reconnect. Others have cut me off entirely, loyal to my parents' version of events. I'm okay with both. You learn who people really are when power shifts. Ray Carter passed away last year at 91. I flew to Vermont for his funeral, sat in the front row, gave a eulogy about his partnership with my grandfather and his faith in me. His daughter approached me afterward. Dad talked about you all the time in his last months, said giving you those shares was the best decision he ever made. He gave me more than shares, I said. He gave me permission to believe I was worthy. She handed me a small box. Inside was a faded photograph, the one from Ray's apartment, two young men in front of a garage. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting, the beginning of everything. 1959. I have it framed on my desk now, next to my grandfather's letter. Last month, I was named to Forbes' 50 over 50 list, business leaders who achieved significant success later in life. The article called me the woman who took back her birthright through patience, strategy, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. A reporter asked me what I'd say to young women who felt overlooked in their families or careers. Don't wait for permission, I told her. Don't wait for anyone to give you a seat at the table. Build your own skills, your own expertise, your own leverage. And when the time is right, when you have the power to change things, don't hesitate. Take what's yours. The article went viral. I got thousands of messages from women who'd experienced something similar, told they weren't good enough, smart enough, male enough to succeed, told to stay in their lane while less qualified brothers and sons got handed opportunities they hadn't earned. I couldn't respond to all of them, but I read every single one. Ethan texted me last week for the first time in 3 years. I need money. The dealership fired me. Can we talk? I didn't respond. Some people might call that petty. Maybe it is. But I spent 23 years watching my family take from me, my ideas, my work, my place in the world. They didn't just overlook me. They actively pushed me out, laughed at my ambitions, treated me like I didn't matter. And when I finally fought back, when I finally claimed what should have been mine, they acted like I was the villain. I'm done apologizing for winning. I'm done feeling guilty for being successful. And I'm definitely done rescuing people who spent decades trying to destroy me. Every Thanksgiving now, I host dinner at my apartment in Manhattan. Not family, not the family I was born into anyway, but the family I've built. Victoria Chen, Marcus Williams, Sarah Chen, the senior team at Bennett Industrial, friends who believed in me when my blood relatives didn't. We eat turkey and share gratitude and toast to the things that matter. Hard work, loyalty, the people who show up when it counts. And every year I raise my glass and make the same toast. To Grandpa Walt, who knew I'd find my way back, and to everyone who told me I couldn't. Thank you for the motivation. The room laughs, we drink, the night goes on. But sometimes, late at night, when everyone's gone and I'm alone in my apartment overlooking the city, I think about that 12-year-old girl sitting in her father's living room, being told she'd never be part of the family legacy. I wish I could go back and tell her what was coming. Tell her that the pain was temporary, but the determination would last forever. Tell her that the people who dismissed her would one day watch her take everything they thought was theirs. I wish I could tell her she was going to win, but maybe she already knew. Maybe that's why she never gave up. My brother stood up at Thanksgiving dinner and announced he was getting everything. I took a sip of wine and changed the ending. Some stories write themselves. Others, you have to fight for every word. This one took me 23 years to finish, but the ending? The ending was worth the wait.